Hello, astrophotographers, and welcome to the third episode of 101 Astronomy. In this episode, we're gonna talk about the optical tube, or specifically as you call it, the telescope itself. There is two parameters of the telescope that you need to understand. But first, I need to specify what we are going to do here. So first, we're gonna learn about what is the specification of the telescope that can give you an indication about what the telescope can do, what it can observe, and how fast it can do that. And in a bit, that will make perfect sense. Second part is going to be about all the types of the telescope that is available in the market, what is their features, how they work, and the conclusion of this episode is basically to understand how to choose your telescope based on your preference, the object you are observing, what is your capabilities in terms of movability, and what each telescope can do, and we'll end up by specifying what is the pros and cons for each telescope separately and which one is going to fit your purpose perfectly. So we'll start by the specification of the telescope, and they are pretty simple. You have two things that identify the telescope in terms of its specification. First, its focal length, and the focal length is the distance from the beginning of the telescope, which is where is the optical lens is located, until the end of the telescope. So this is the focal length. So if this area is 700 millimeter, so therefore the focal length of this telescope is 700 millimeter. The second part is the aperture of the telescope, and this specification you will always find it in the manuals of the telescope or in the website that you are visiting, so you can exactly know how to use those. The second part, which is the aperture, which is actually the diameter of the lens that it's collecting the light. And for this telescope, for example, we have a 714 millimeter of focal length and the aperture of almost 4-inch or 102 millimeter. And these two numbers divided each other will give you the F number of the telescope. Why we need the F number? Because the F number will determine how fast the telescope can gather the light or how slow the telescope can gather the light. So for example, for a 714 millimeter focal length telescope with an aperture of 102 millimeter, dividing these two, and it will give you an aperture of almost a 7F. This is considered a slow telescope, right? So it means that it needs more time to gather light. To put that in perspective, comparing to another telescope that I have a 700 millimeter focal length and an aperture of let's say 300 millimeter of aperture, which is the diameter of it, then this will give you an f3 and this will give you an f7. So an f3 telescope needs, if the f7 telescope needs 2 minutes of exposure to collect the light from object in order for it to be visible in the frame, then the f3 telescope will require something like less than a minute or maybe 30 seconds. So now you understand the difference, what's the effect of a bigger aperture ratio comparing to the focal length. And that's how you choose your telescope. And sometimes it's favorable to choose a faster telescope rather than a slower telescope, and even some other areas it's gonna be favorable to choose a little bit slower telescope, but we are not gonna dig deep into that area not yet. However, now we can move to the main types of the telescope, which is basically, you have, in terms of optics, you have either a refractor or a reflector. This is a kind of a refractor, which means it refracts the light because it has a lens. By the meaning of the word, a reflector have a reflector surface, which meaning a mirror. So you have either a reflector or a refractor. But within these categories, you have subcategories. So for a refractor telescope like this, you have something it's called an EP refractor, which is achromat telescope. Basically, it identifies how many lenses it has at the beginning. So an achromat, it has two lenses at the beginning, and apochromat have three lenses here, and they help keep the three spectrum of light, which is the three colors, the red, blue, and green, in focus perfectly at the end. But for two lenses only, they help part of that and not the rest of it. And we'll explain later why that is important. However, you now know, you just need to know that a refractor telescope is actually using lenses, and it's usually long because the only way to provide a longer focal length, which is the zoom capability that you are looking for, is to have a longer one, which means also that the longer focal length you need, or the more zoom you need, the more bigger your telescope is gonna get. This is category A, which is the refractors. Now let's jump to reflectors. And as you can see in the picture, that reflector reflects light, and you have two types of that. One type it's called Newtonian type, and the other one it's called a Schmidt-Cathedral type. And first, a Newtonian. Newtonian is kind of a tube, as you can see in the picture, that it's long and it have a bigger aperture, so it have a big advantage over the refractor telescope, that it can provide a bigger aperture since its cylinder is bigger than the refractor. However, since there is mirrors inside and the light is coming from the side, then the advantage here is that you are providing a longer focal length in a shorter tube, which is an advantage. But one of the disadvantages of such a telescope, that it's hard to use, especially if you are a beginner, because it requires something like, it's called a coma correction. That is a piece that you fix on the telescope, and you need to correct the coma. Basically, you don't need to go into details with this, but the idea is that mirrors are not perfect, and you need to align it perfectly in order for you to see the object in the center of the point of the star is going to be in the center of the object accurately. So I don't recommend it for a beginner, but this is the basic idea of a Newtonian telescope. Now the second subcategory of the reflectors is called a Schmidt-Cathedral, and one example of that would be the Celestron HD. This kind of telescope provide the maximum focal length in a shortest or a smallest size telescope. Why? Because as you see here in the picture, that the light comes from one direction, reflects from the main mirror, and then goes back to the second smaller secondary mirror in the middle of the telescope, in the middle of the surface of the exit surface of the telescope, and then reflect back again to exit through the hole which the telescope have in order for you to insert or fix your camera there. And the good thing about this kind of telescope, that it have a huge focal length, because it can reach easily 1800 millimeter or 2000 millimeter, and you don't have to have a 2000 millimeter telescope, which is actually a 2-meter telescope. So you don't have to do that. If you need to reach the same focal length in a refractor, your telescope will be 2 meters long tube. But in here, you don't have to do that, because it's a compact size and it reflects the light through these mirrors, and it goes out from the end of the telescope, and then you insert your camera, and then you will be able to see the image. However, the Schmidt-Cathedral telescope tend to be a heavy telescope. So the one, as we said, the advantage of this telescope, that you can get a huge focal length in a compact size, and it also comes in big aperture, so this is gonna make it a little bit faster to capture image. But also it is proportional to the length of the focal length, so it's kind of the same F number you get from refractor unless something else you can do, which we're going to speak about in a minute. The point here to make is that advantages is that you will get a compact size, but the problem is heavy. Advantage, you will get a focal length, but the problem that it's heavy again, and also needs a bigger mount to install on. But one more thing you need to understand about Schmidt-Cathegerin is that they need something that's called collimation. And collimation is basically, as you see in this picture, that the first mirror that it looks in yellow here is not installed perfectly, or sometimes within the movement and this and that, after some time it will not be perfect aligned, so you will have to collimate that. You have to move it in order for it to be almost perfect horizontally with the main mirror. And this is gonna be a lot of pain at the beginning if you are starting astrophotography, especially with all the strains that a huge focal length telescope will put, and reaching focus will be an issue. So it's not made for a beginner telescope. A beginner telescope would be something like a refractor like this one. They have their advantages and disadvantages, but this is what I recommend for a beginner. So in order for us to sum up the idea of or sum up the pros and cons for each type, we'll start by refractors, and their advantage is that they are a little bit sharper in terms of the images. Their advantage, they are a bit light if you are choosing an achromat telescope, not an apochromat, because here, as I said, in the first category you have only 2 lenses, and the other one you have 3 lenses, so it's going to be a little bit heavier. But their advantage in general, they are sharp and they are a bit light, and they don't require a very heavy duty mount to carry them. So something within maximum of 700 millimeter of focal length like this one will be able to be carried on a much smaller mount than this. It will not cost you a lot of money, and you can easily start by something like this at the beginning. The disadvantage is that they are long and they don't require any maintenance. This is an advantage for it. For the reflectors, the advantage of Newtonian telescope that it have a bigger aperture, so it's gonna be a little bit faster telescope than this one, since it will provide a bigger focal length but also a bigger aperture. It's gonna be a little bit faster than this. Disadvantage, they require a lot of maintenance. They require something it's called coma correction piece, and you need to do some work in order for them to be suitable for astrophotography and suitable for first use, and some other tools that you have to buy with them, but they are not heavy and they don't require a very heavy mount, so this is an advantage. For a Schmidt-Cathegerin type, advantages: huge focal length. Advantages: compact size. Disadvantages: very hard to start by because they are very sensitive. Secondly, they are heavy, so you need a bigger mount. Third, they require maintenance, collimation to the secondary mirror, which is something that not easy. It's not impossible, but it's not easy for a beginner at all, right? Also, for all of these type of telescope, you can install something, it's called a reducer, and this will reduce the capacity, the focal length of the telescope by inserting a piece here for the refractor, or inserting a piece here for the Newtonian, or inserting a piece at the back of the Schmidt-Cathegerin telescope to reduce the focal length, and since your aperture is still the same, so that will make your telescope a little bit faster. Something I forgot to mention about refractors, which is you need to add something, it's called field flattener, to flatten the field because in refractors they have one problem, that without a flattener the edges of the image will look a little bit distorted, and this is a problem. So, but the good thing is that usually they come with the flattener comes as a reducer and a flattener. You have the option, of course, of choosing only reducer or a flattener, but a flattener is a must for a refractor. So this is a very important thing to add for the refractors. However, they are very easy to use, so I will highly recommend it as a beginner telescope. One more advantage I forgot to mention about the refractors, which is they usually comes with a dew shield. And just to skim through the idea of the dew shield now, it's a piece here, as you can see in this picture, that it's a piece that is in front of the lens. So your lens is here, and this one goes up to give it a protection a little bit better from the dew in the air. However, it's also provide a darker space around the lens, so this is helps with the light pollution a little bit. Lastly, I want to mention something, which is what is my target out of this series. This series is made for somebody who starting astrophotography and you want to know every basic thing he needs to know to choose his equipment in terms of everything, and what is the challenges that he gonna find with each type of mount, each type of telescope, each type of camera. Not always bigger will be better, and not always the more expensive thing will be the one you need to start with. And sometimes, trust me, you will need to start with something deliberately small and deliberately less capable in order for you to achieve what you really want to achieve at the beginning, and make your journey a bit easier and not a pain to start, and make this hobby fun, not just suffering, you know. I hope that helps, and next episode we're gonna be speaking about mainly cameras, how to choose them, what is their specs, and how to match them with your telescope will be a scope for another episode in the future, when we are collecting all of these parts together after we finish the series, and how to choose them wisely based on your needs that you already identified when you knew everything about each element. Thank you for watching, and I hope that will help you in the future. And if you have any questions, please mention it in the comment section, and I will be happy to answer it. Until next time, thank you.